toward multimodal transportation is the increasing use of land use strategies that reduce trips and vehicle miles of travel by auto and support transit ridership. You know, one example is transit-oriented development. TODs are compact, moderate to high intensity, mixed-use areas within 1/2 mile of transit stations, and they're designed to maximize walking trips and access to transit. This slide shows the critical walkable area within that 1/2 mile around transit stations. It also makes the point that transit stations connect to transit corridors, which together form a transit system. Just quickly, this next slide, I thought I'd show you some examples of TOD from Florida. You'll see one from Jacksonville, Tampa, and also here in Miami. Still another shift toward multimodal transportation involves initiatives promoting complete streets. Complete streets meet the needs of all modes of travel and all users, pedestrians, bicyclists, transit riders, and motorists. Local governments in built-out Broward County are actively engaged in complete streets initiatives. One final example that I'll share with you about the shift toward multimodal transportation is the increasing interest in performance measurement addressing all modes of travel. We often hear about roadway level of service. There are also performance for other modes, and it's good to look at them side by side. Briefly to mention freight, there's a lot of more attention, rightly so, being paid to the planning for the movement of freight. One catalyst for this has been, as mentioned multiple times, the anticipated opening of the expanded Panama Canal. What's shown here is Port Everglades, and one example of a freight project with a sustainability element is this Port Everglades Intermodal Cargo Transfer Facility. It's a long name, but in short, this facility will allow cargo to go directly from ships to rail, reducing emissions. Need to mention, this has also been brought up, transportation systems management and operations and transportation demand management. The I-95 project's a good example of one that combines these strategies. You've got increased travel reliability for the auto users of the facility, and you also have carpools and van pools running in them, and also express bus. This project utilizes congestion pricing and managed lanes both to ensure that minimum travel speed and make express bus service possible crossing the county line. And then one emerging challenge relates to the need to identify and address the impacts of extreme weather and sea level rise on transportation infrastructure. Southeast Florida is already experiencing such impacts. The photo on the left is from October 2012, damage to State Road A1A in Fort Lauderdale from a combination of high tides, high seas, and Hurricane Sandy. The same month of the year, that's down, this is one visual from Miami and South Beach that resulted from an unexpected downpour. And just to mention, you'll probably hear more about it, the transportation partners in the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Change Compact have got a grant from the Federal Highway Administration to do a study looking into climate change vulnerability and adaptation for transportation investments. The idea is, how do you integrate these considerations into the transportation decision-making process? And you might want to jot this down, and the Federal Highway has an INVEST tool that looks at the sustainability of highway projects. There is a website for more information. And to conclude, as my time is up, I see. Last slide. You got it? Anyway, there are, it's obvious there are lots of challenges and changes ahead, many of them unprecedented, and lots of opportunities. These thoughts, particularly with the panelists following me, you're moving transportation infrastructure in a sustainable direction. It's going to affect many things: roles and relationships, partnerships, what types of transportation projects and services get selected and get funded. Also, materials used and things such as funding approaches.
Thank you very much. Caesar, next. Okay, some logistics first. There we go. Good afternoon. I wanted to thank all of you in our audience today for joining us in this FIU and MIT Transportation Infrastructure Summit. I want to thank all of those who made it possible. And I wanted to take the opportunity, I could not resist, to share with you this image we put on the screen today. And the reason for that is I would like to go back and share a story from a casual conversation with a former Secretary of Transportation in Puerto Rico. He basically took a trip to Rome and paused for a moment with his kids, kneeled down, even kissed the grounds of nothing other than the Via Appia, or the Appian Way, which I'm showing here in the picture. And this is a moment to reflect that we can honor transportation infrastructure that actually spans not only decades, not centuries, but millennia. And it does that in a way that it actually connects with the surrounding environment. Definitely the trees look nice in there. And I would argue that true, 363 miles of this Appian Way are no longer today in use, but sections of it are. And those sections that still are presently being used exhibit this interrelationship of the development and the surroundings. And remember, for this panel purposes, we're wearing our environmental hat. This is the environmental panel. So what we're looking at is basically this interrelationship between infrastructure and the environment. So long life is critical, and that's why I wanted to share this slide. In the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about some challenges and perhaps jump right into what I think is the potential game changer to be faster in implementing positive change in the sustainable environment component of our pillars of sustainability. What I will say is that if we look into life cycle and if we look into environmental footprint, we are immediately going to be asking ourselves about what do we mean by that? If I go to table 5, where's table 5? And I say, I just said that the life cycle needs to be improved. Probably what I'm thinking about what the life cycle encompasses, what the boundary is, what are we impacting, what boxes are there in that life cycle, may not be the same. The same thing when I say environmental footprint. What does it mean? Table 9, what does it mean? Are we saying the same thing? And we're all here joining in this event today precisely to do that. So my challenge for us to consider is that we need to have a language. I'm going to call it, for lack of better terms, a lack of harmonized language that makes all of us understand each other in terms of what do I mean, but am I making better for the environment? Or am I just feeling good about it? I think earlier we had a conversation, one of the panelists talked about the feeling good part of it versus the actually doing something. I think Franz said something to that effect. So in light of that, what I wanted to do is then say, what does this language mean? If I were to ask maybe table 13 or something, for buildings, what do we have for buildings today? If I say green building, what do I have? Probably LEED may come to mind. Another panelist actually talked about it. If I say green roads, what comes to mind? Well, some of us may say, well, green roads comes to mind. Unfortunately, the number of people involved in what it means to define or harmonize what we mean in different aspects of what those criteria are for infrastructure is not so easy. So language, I present as a challenge. And then what I'm going to say is the way to tackle this challenge is for all of us through education, I think we talked about education, that we define basically the principles.